Thank you, Betsy. Thank you for joining me today. And when did you first realize you needed a Christmas miracle?
This happening in our family's life happened almost 30 years ago. We didn't realize we needed the kind of miracle that was going to be necessary until it was happening. But the year up to that December had been a very, very difficult year on a lot of different layers. The details of which are not important, because what I really want to do is say that the backdrop creating the necessity for an intervention from God, which turned out to be a Christmas miracle, um, it was just hard in every possible way that year. So by the time December 1st came, and my husband was a pastor. I was involved in women's ministry and children's ministry. I was a piano teacher. I was involved in the community. We loved God with all of our hearts. But by December 1st, my husband being an associate pastor, we had been unable to save any money during the year because of financial necessities. And so we had, at that point in time, probably a 20-year history of trusting God for our financial and material needs. And so we realized we couldn't buy a Christmas tree. We couldn't buy our children Christmas presents. For the entire year, we had not, this was 30 years ago, but we hadn't been to a single movie because movie tickets were too expensive. We had been unable to buy clothes, school clothes for our children for the fall. And our attitude towards this was God sees us and he knows our needs and he's a good provider and we're going to trust him. But when we came to the realization that we weren't going to be able to give Christmas presents to our children in the way that we had been used to, not that we were extravagant in any way, but that was, what parent doesn't want to give Christmas presents to their children, right? And we realized this the beginning of December. And so we gathered our children and we said, we're going to celebrate Christmas in a way that we're going to have fun. And we can do some Christmas baking and we'll play games. And we're just going to celebrate Jesus's birth in a way that probably people for millennia all over the globe have celebrated. We were so proud of our children because that's really bad news to receive as a kid, right? But they were quiet and they were respectful and they didn't whine or get angry. They were just beautiful. And my husband was a pastor. I was involved in women's ministry and children's ministry. I was a piano teacher. I was involved in the community. We loved God with all of our hearts. But by December 1st, my husband being an associate pastor, we had been unable to save any money during the year because of financial necessities. And so we had, at that point in time, probably a 20-year history of trusting God for our financial and material needs. We realized we couldn't buy a Christmas tree. We couldn't buy our children Christmas presents. For the entire year, we had not, this was 30 years ago, but we hadn't been to a single movie because movie tickets were too expensive. We had been unable to buy clothes, school clothes for our children for the fall. Our attitude towards this was God sees us and he knows our needs and he's a good provider and we're going to trust him. But when we came to the realization that we weren't going to be able to give Christmas presents to our children in the way that we had been used to, not that we were extravagant in any way, but that was, what parent doesn't want to give Christmas presents to their children, right? And we realized this the beginning of December. And so we gathered our children and we said, we're going to celebrate Christmas in a way that we're going to have fun. and we can do some Christmas baking, and we'll play games, and we're just going to celebrate Jesus's birth in a way that probably people for millennia all over the globe have celebrated. And we were so proud of our children because that's really bad news to receive as a kid, right? But they were quiet and they were respectful, and they didn't whine or get angry. They were just beautiful. And so we move through December. We have food on the table and we can pay our mortgage, but still, we couldn't even afford a Christmas tree. Well, the week before Christmas, a friend brought a Christmas tree. And so we had a Christmas tree decorated in the corner of our living room. And the Monday before Christmas, which was going to happen on a Saturday that year, we sat down at the dinner table and thanked the Lord for the food. And there was a knock at the door. And we opened the door, and 3 friends were standing there with wrapped Christmas gifts in their arms. Now, we had told our children, please do not tell this to anybody. And as a matter of fact, around the family dinner table last night, because we have a family dinner every Sunday night, I said, did you tell somebody about our need? And both of the girls looked at me and said, no. And our son wouldn't have. Anyway. So we still do not know to this day how they found out that we were going to be without Christmas gifts. 3 friends walk in the door, put down a load of wrapped Christmas gifts, and go out to their cars another 2 times to get more gifts. And within, 5 minutes, our tree is loaded with beautiful Christmas gifts. And our youngest, we had 2 teenagers and an 8-year-old. The 8-year-old was jumping up and down. This is going to be the best Christmas ever. And we were just beside ourselves with joy. Said goodbye with lots of hugs to our friends and sat down at the dinner table and really thanked the Lord at that point, and decided that we would not open the gifts until Christmas Day. We were planning on getting in our van, 3 kids and a dog and a cat, and driving down. It should have been a 6.5-hour drive to Southern California to be with my parents. We put all of the gifts in 3 big black trash bags. They weren't tied shut, but 3 black trash bags on the top of the roof of the van in a cargo carrier, along with our clothes. And we got in the car on the 24th of December, which was a Friday. And we had been driving about 6.5 hours and were at the intersection of 2 major freeways in Southern California. 7 lanes of practically a parking lot on the freeway. It was nuts. We were, moving at about 15 miles an hour. Maybe we were in lane 1, at the very left in the diamond lane, because obviously we were a carpool. And all of a sudden, all these cars started honking, and like cars behind us were honking, and we had no idea why. But at that very moment, we could see on our dashboard, the indicator for the alternator was fluctuating. And when the alternator on a car is about ready to go out, it draws on the battery. And when the battery runs out, you've got a car stuck in the middle of the freeway. And so here we were in lane 1, and we were annoyed at the cars honking at us. And we moved safely across 7 lanes of traffic and pulled into that right-hand shoulder there. My husband parked the car to see if maybe he could, jostle a lead or something like that under the hood. And the lady that had been driving behind us had followed us all the way to the right-hand lane. She got out of the car, and my husband said she looked mad. Turns out she was upset. She wasn't mad. She said, "Sir, you have been losing Christmas presents off the top of your car." And sure enough, the cargo carrier the latch had failed somehow and the cargo carrier was open. All of our clothes were there. None of the presents were there.
Oh, oh no.
And our alternator is unsteady. So my husband gets on the back in the car and we pray and we said, God, we need a Christmas miracle. That was the moment we knew that we needed another miracle, right? The gifts were one miracle, the safety. And I knew my husband. My husband was a Vietnam vet. He had gone to war. There was nothing he couldn't do as far as he was concerned. And he didn't tell me, but I knew exactly what he was going to say. He wanted to circle back around, find the location of the Christmas present drop, put the car in park, get out, and retrieve the presents all up and down the freeway. I prayed silently. I said, God, you've got to stop him. I don't want to be in the ER with my children on Christmas Eve. This is getting worse by the moment, Lord. So we go along the right-hand lane there and get off on the exit and go over the overpass. And just as we are about ready to go onto the road that would allow him to go back on the freeway, our alternator completely died. No electrical power, no power steering, brakes that you really have to press on to make the van stop. And there just happened to be a very large hotel with an empty parking lot in the back of the hotel. And so we coasted into this empty parking lot safely, brought the van to a stop. My husband, and at the end of the parking lot was an open gas station. By this time, it's about sunset. An open gas station with a sign, mechanic on duty. Well, okay. So my husband lifts the hood, tells us to stay in the van, and he walks over to the gas station. His shoulders are slumped, his head is down. His whole body language says, this is going to be the worst Christmas ever. And so while he's there, the kids and I pray again. I call a friend. She said, you need a miracle. And she prayed for a miracle for us. And I agreed with her wholeheartedly. Soon after that, a CHP, California Highway Patrol officer, drove up in his vehicle. And he had his kind of arm resting on the window, biggest forearm on a man I've ever seen, with the biggest Navy SEAL tattoo I had ever seen. It took up his entire forearm, which means he was special services. It means that he had been trained. He'd been on all manner of things that we don't even want to think about. He had just been reassigned that day to this territory for reasons that I don't need to go into, but we feel like his assignment to a new beat that day was God's hand on him and on us. He drives up and he says, it looks like you need some help. Can I help you? And I said, we've lost all of our Christmas presents on the freeway, and we're not exactly sure where, and our alternator has died. And meanwhile, inside, I'm thinking to myself, why is it that as soon as I have to put words to how horrible this is, it seems so much worse, right? And I'm trying not to get teary as I'm talking to him. He said, well, go get your husband. So the kids run over to the mechanic there, and he had determined in that little bit of time, my husband, that the mechanic could have the van fixed by the 27th. And so we called my parents, and they were on their way up, and my husband hopped into the front seat of the CHP vehicle, and they disappeared to try to find the place where the Christmas presents had fallen off, which took a while. Once they found it, well, I guess I'll tell the story this way. Once they found it, he met a tag team of another 2 CHP vehicles in like a 7-Eleven parking lot off the freeway. And he said to my husband, we're going to shut down the freeway. And so they all go on to the on-ramp with their lights, going, and they zigzag across 7 lanes of traffic and bring all of that traffic to a stop. And you know what happens on the other side of the freeway when they see what's happening. Yeah. And so we think that their pace probably slowed. We wonder whether they were watching a miracle, but we don't know, of course. And they found the place of the Christmas present drop. The CHP officer says to my husband, you stay here, I will get the presents.
Wow.
They gathered all of the presents. None of them had been ruined because they had all fallen against the barrier between the north and the south freeways there. And so they were all safe. And they came back, both of them smiling. By this time, my parents, they were standing there witnessing this whole thing with us. And we're standing, watching them come up with smiles on their faces. And they said, we found them. And our youngest was like, this is the best Christmas ever, right? So we were able to get all of the stuff into the 2 cars, small cars that my parents had driven probably an hour to get to us, because after all, it was now the evening of December 24th, everybody wanting to get to where they wanted to go on Christmas Eve. And I could finally relax in the back of my mother's car with a couple of the kids and breathe a sigh of relief. And I silently thanked the Lord. And I heard his whisper. Sorry. And he said to me, I knew you wanted to give good gifts to your children. And so I gave them to you not once, but twice.
Oh.
So that you would know I am a good and gift-giving God, and I love you. Oh, is that amazing?
What a beautiful story, Betsy. Beautiful. And I'm sure that's not the end.
It isn't quite the end. We got home, and 2 days later drove up to pick up our van. And I'd forgotten to tell you that my friends at the beginning of the week had brought an envelope along with the wrapped Christmas gifts. And they said, we raised a little more money, and we could have gotten you gifts, but we thought maybe you would like the check instead. So they bought 5 movie tickets. So how fun was that? Especially for the kids. And there was a check for $127. And when my husband went to pick up the van, the cost of the alternator and the labor was $127.
Only God.
Only God. And that was our Christmas miracle. It was like the cascade of God's goodness was highlighted by the backdrop of like apoplectic need,
Oh, Betsy, what a story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that. I know that's going to warm someone's heart because it's so beautiful. I love the way that God works. I love the way that his timing is so perfect. And, our lives could be just going along, going along, going along. And then you think that God isn't really paying attention to you, but he just happens to rise some things up just for a beautiful Christmas for you and your family, to show you how much he loves you and to show you through other people how much he loves you.
Oh, true, true. So, I've been thinking this past week about the Christmas story and how one of the names of Jesus was to be Emmanuel, God with us. And for all of the difficulties we go through, everybody goes through difficulties, some little, some tremendous. And God is with us. To me, that is one of the sweetest names of Jesus that I can think of.
It is. Betsy, thank you for sharing that story. Would you like to say anything to the audience before we close?
God is with us and He is for us. He will never fail us or forsake us. And that's what His word says in multiple places in His written word. And how grateful we are to Him for putting His words in black and white so we can review them again and again, but also the Holy Spirit's indwelling presence, and that His whispers that we can always discern by whether or not they are consistent with God's written word. He wants to speak to us, and He is God with us, and He'll never fail us or forsake us, no matter what kinds of difficulties we find ourselves in.